My name is Willy Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. This episode is brought to you by Rainmakers. But here's the thing, it's not the word Rainmakers. It's the word Rainmakers with no vowels. RNMKRS, Rainmakers. How will artificial intelligence change the future of sales? Will it help us do more, replace us? Join Rainmakers virtual sales competition to see AI in action, helping thousands of students get massive role-play practice and feedback on a bias-free level playing field, and it's free. To join the movement, go to rainmakers.org. Again, that's RNMKRS, Rainmakers with no vowels.org. Hey, everybody. If you are thinking to yourself, man, it's been a while since Bolander published a new episode of the Sales Lab, you are correct. It has been a little while. It's actually been very busy doing a project with a whole bunch of video content with some colleagues from all around the world, collecting these panel discussions on international issues in sales. I think I've posted about it a little bit on social media, but hopefully you'll be hearing more about that coming up. And I'll be directing you to some of those videos because there's some pretty fascinating stuff. Basically 20 different parts of the world having a similar discussion about sales management. But I have a new episode now. I am going to meet with this guy named Marcus Smith. He is with Boss Alliance Financial Group, formerly with Liberty Mutual Insurance. He is a graduate of the University of Houston from actually before I was even teaching at the University of Houston. He had graduated, and I met him, as I kind of joke about in the interview, as like this hero, as this almost like folklore-ish type of hero, because he came into Liberty Mutual and just started blowing their numbers out of the water and really kind of setting new expectations and breaking records. And, when you talk about a guy who hits the ground running, Marcus Smith is this guy. And I'm really glad he was able to sit down with me for a few minutes. And I hope you get a lot out of it, because this is a person that if you had the chance to sit down and talk with him for 30 minutes, for an hour, to have lunch or coffee with him, you should do it. And you should listen to what he has to say, because he doesn't just know his stuff, he knows how to do his stuff. We talk about a number of different things here, a lot about failure, fear, hunger, and anger, which, to me are great, interesting topics. We'll also talk about sales theory, networking, football. Actually, Marcus, before he went into sales, was planning to go into professional football. This may be one of the only times you hear me talk about sports, because I don't know anything about sports. Don't tell Marcus. I also have an interesting discussion about the techniques, the selling techniques, and then the timing of when to apply those techniques, and a few other things. Hope you get a lot out of it. When I became aware of you, you were essentially like this mythological creature that had graduated from Houston out of the sales program. And I know you had a sort of a past as an athlete, and we're kind of going down that road, and then took a change of course and decided, you know what, I'm going to go into business, I'm going to go into sales, and then just started crushing your numbers in a way that if you picture kind of the distribution of employees' performance as kind of a normal bell curve, and, for some organizations, in some cases, that's what it looks like. But as I recall, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head specifically, but in your organization where you were first working, it was sort of like a bell curve, and then a really, really long space where nobody was hitting the performance numbers, and then Marcus way, way, way at the top end of this distribution as a complete outlier. So can you walk us through kind of your journey, and then, how do you go from, you're playing football, right?
Right.
And then how do you go from that to sales? And then what are the steps you put together when you begin your professional life that allow you to be so massively successful?
First failure, to be honest. First failure. Because when I was playing football, my only goal and my main goal was obviously to make it to the NFL. 2 shoulder separations definitely hurt that dream. Mm. And I was sitting in a place, Willie, where I was looking back. right? And my hindsight was ugly because before my senior year, my academic advisor in an athletic facility, she came to me and she said, Marcus, you have a couple of options. You could actually finish your senior year and play with your guys that you came in with, but you would have to get out of the business school because you don't have enough credits. Or we can change your major to economics, and then that would give you enough credits to finish with economics and enough credits to finish playing football. Well, I chose to go out with my guys, right? Because that was my dream and all of that kind of stuff. But now, when I was looking back at that decision, we didn't win any games that year, Willie.
Oh no.
And I'm sitting there injured, shoulder dislocated. I'm knowing that I'm getting ready to hang up my dream of football. And you sitting there like, okay, oh my God, what am I gonna do? You get an economics degree that you really didn't put your all into because you was more so putting maybe 20% into your education, 80% into football, right?
Yeah.
So when you graduate, you really don't have a great grasp of economics. You didn't network to really get employed or to actually pursue a career in economics. And I didn't really know what to do with economics. So I'm sitting here with a college degree, Willie, and my first job is in the Boys and Girls Club off of Selinsky, in a very bad part of Houston. And I'm making $10 an hour and I'm reflecting a lot, right? And I say, you know what? I got to do better. I actually dropped out of the business school, which I wanted to do for something I didn't want to do. Well, it's up to you to make something happen, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So I went back and I said, I'm going to get back into business school. And it was an uphill road to actually get in. I'm not going to even talk about that because that's a story in itself. I had to, it took a lot of faith and a lot of work. And I basically had to make all A's straight to even have a chance to get into business school. And I did. But obviously that was a major sacrifice. So when I was able to get back into the business school and I barely squeaked in, um, I was appreciative of the business school, I think more than most. I saw it, I would say, because of my failure, Willie, as something to not take for granted. Because at that time, I saw what life was like in a hard economy, even with a degree, without a good plan. So going into the business school, I was hungry. I was extremely hungry and I was extremely aggressive about working hard to make myself marketable the next time. So when I went back, I first wanted to, my first goal was to be an entrepreneur. So I got into the entrepreneurship program and bust my butt to do that. But when I finished the entrepreneurship program, I didn't really believe in my business at the time. So I was like, well, you're going to have to do something else that's going to make you marketable. And then obviously researching the program for excellence in selling where I met you, and I found out that 90% of the graduates was finishing with a job in hand, and most of them made six figures within their first 3 years from going into sales. So that's why when I was in the program for excellence in selling, I wasn't the typical student. I was a student that I was I was trying to master everything because it was like when I go back out there in the workforce, I don't want to just be halfway ready. I want to be way above what I need to be and extremely marketable. So I didn't
And
know.
how old were you at that time?
I think I was 26, 25.
Okay.
So it was, but I was in a place of I knew what life was like for a college degree person who was kind of floating through school. And it was like, you can't do that anymore, you know? And you asked a question earlier about how does my athleticism and my football background help in school, where it was the I would say it like this: the same determination and the same work ethic and drive that I put into football, I now was able to fully apply to my academics. right? But what I didn't know, Willie, was that that same effort was going to exponentially pay off in my work career.
Hmm.
And it exponentially paid off because when you're learning sales theory, sales theory can seem corny until you actually start using it. And when you start using real professional sales theory like you teach, you start seeing that there's a major return on investment from doing sales theory the correct way.
Hmm.
And so everything just began to obviously go to a whole nother level because of the pain that I first started with, I would say. So it was actually to answer your question, when you said I was a mythological figure, it was because I was first afraid to go back out into a workforce and work for the Boys and Girls Club.
Mm-hmm.
So uh and the same thing I even said about politics, fear is a major motivator for a lot of us, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's what created the Marcus that you met later in life, the guy that was winning the National Rookie of the Year and the #1 salesperson in Fortune 100 companies, uh, changing the whole culture of a Fortune 100 company, doing the internal sales jobs and all the things that I was doing. It was because what catapulted me was the hunger that came from failure.
Absolutely. That it's not dissimilar from some of my background, actually. I don't know if you know this, but I was playing music all through my teens and early 20s and was kind of putting all of my eggs in that basket. And
Right.
then one project dried up and I floundered around for about a year or two. Found another project. I said, I'm gonna do this until it stops being fun. And it stopped being fun. And some people continue to do that because they're deeply passionate about it, and I just realized I'm not. So why am I going to keep chasing this elusive, improbable sort of path to success when it's not even really something that at the end of the day I'm that passionate about? But then I had to look back at the years I spent doing it and kind of get a little angry with myself, kind of say, okay, wow, if you had even just taken your classes a little bit seriously when at a time I was doing part-time school and, playing music and all this stuff. And it was really that kind of anger at that lost time. I guess you could say fear that I might waste another 5 years, another 10 years, right? That kind of got me out of bed and said, okay, well, let's hit the ground running. Let's make sure that something is different in your life in the next 5 years compared to it is the way it is now, and really set an awful lot of things in motion. So, can you give me an example, though, of, you said earlier, sometimes these sales theories will sound cheesy, but then they're very useful. Can you give me an example of, and I agree. I mean, some of the stuff, even the idea of the one that's always gives me trouble is teaching somebody how to do an approach and an introduction. It's like, okay, I'm going to stand here in a university and tell you to shake somebody's hand and say your full name. And yet, if I don't cover it and I watch my students go and do an introduction, they'll maybe get their first name out and assume that their last name isn't important. And it gets very strange. Like, yeah, okay, sometimes you do have to spell these things out for people that haven't done this yet. But
Yes.
Give me one of your examples.
I'll take that one first.
Uh-oh.
So the approach for an unseasoned networker is very awkward, especially when you walk into a professional networking event and you were the type of guy or a lady where you really didn't have a lot of experience. Maybe you worked at a bar, or maybe you was like me, worked at a Boys and Girls Club, an odd job, but now you have to put on a professional face. When you first put on that professional face to try to make yourself stand out, it's awkward. Like, how do I do that in this group full of strangers? So in the program, one of the techniques that we learned from one of the books that they gave us is how to network. And it's actually easy. It might seem cheesy, but it works exponentially well. So what I was taught, and I still do it to this day, is whenever you want to be a super networker, one of the things you want to do as soon as you make eye contact with anybody that's within 3 feet, the first thing you do is walk right up to them and introduce yourself, obviously, right? How you doing? My name is Marcus Smith. How are you? Right? And then they're going to respond. The first thing that I learned to do from the program for excellent selling that works so well is you always ask questions about them first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so when you ask questions about them, the crazy thing about it is it makes them what? Like you. Because
Hmm.
people love talking about themselves. So if I walk up to Willie and say, "Hey, Willie, how you doing? My name is Marcus." Right? So obviously you're going to introduce yourself. And I say, "Willie, what do you do?" And then you'll say,
I'm a professor and I research sales organizations.
"Really? Wow." So tell me more about that because I'm actually in sales myself. You might be able to give me some tips. Right. So, and I asked it in an open format, which I was also taught to do in the program. Don't
Hmm.
ask closed-ended questions. I said, please tell me about that. Right. Because then that opens you up to just expound on whatever you want to. Right.
Absolutely.
And when I do that about 2 or 3 times, and I do that around the whole room, when people are watching you, right, they'll say, "Who is that guy? He knows everybody."
Hmm.
Right. And it gives an outside powerful impression as you're networking, but that's a technique that I learned from the sales program. So and just like you, when I would mentor some of the students, I would teach them that because I could see, like you said, that they were struggling with how do I introduce myself and how do I meet these people that can end up being prospects for the sales products that they were selling within the program, you know?
Mm. Yep.
So that was one. And then the most corny that people would take corny but are extremely effective if you take it serious are actual sales techniques, right? Like that they teach you, like feel, felt, found,
Yep.
choice closes, right? Assumptive closes, and all of those type of things that make an exponential difference in your effectiveness as a salesperson. And one of the things that I had to learn on my own, because I learned a theory in the program for excellence in selling, what I had to learn on my own was the timing of techniques, Willie. That
Mm.
that was the only part that I really wish that they tweaked, because they would teach you the techniques, but the timing of the techniques is just as important. For example, so everybody know about choice clauses when we teach sales theory, right? Give
Absolutely.
people choices, right? That helps you when you're trying to narrow people down. But it's the timing of when you do it. So when I teach my interns or I teach people that I might mentor, the best time to use choice clauses is when you're trying to collect money or if you're trying to close on an appointment.
Mm.
So, for instance, I didn't do it with you because I didn't want to do it with you when we was trying to close in on this appointment, right? But for anybody else outside of a professor that I know understands sales theory, right? I'ma always start broad when I'm trying to narrow down an appointment and then let them feel as if they're controlling it, but I'm controlling it. So for instance, if I'm trying to close an appointment, I say, "Hey, Willie, I really want to sit down with you and talk about this podcast. Let me look at my schedule real quick because I have a couple of openings. I have the end of this week and have the beginning of next week."
Mm.
That's broad. And then what happens is if I can get you to look at your calendar, I pretty much already won, right? Because then if you look at the calendar, you say, "Marcus, Friday is bad, but Monday is actually good." I'm going to narrow it down more. I'm going to say, "Good, perfect. That's good for me as well. Monday morning or evening," right? Now,
Yep.
when you answer that question, you're narrowing it down for me, even though you think you're narrowing it down for you, right? So, yeah, Monday mornings are bad for me, but Monday evening looks good. Perfect. Okay, so I was thinking more so like 12 or 2. Let's do 3. Perfect. 3 it is. I'll see you at 3, Willie, right?
Yep.
So the choice close. And those of us who in sales know that sometimes the biggest thing that you're trying to do is to sit down in front of people. Because when you can get in front of a person, we know this from sales theory and notice to be true, your closing ratio goes way up when you're able to sit down in front of somebody versus trying to sell or do any kind of solicitation via the phone, right? So to have the skills to be able to get appointments versus other people don't, does not. It automatically puts you in a better position to win in sales. And that's just one example. But those sales techniques that some would assume to be corny are exponentially important when you're actually doing it for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thinking about something like spin questions, right? Your situation, your problem, your implication, your need payoff. I find that I don't know if it's. I think sometimes people interpret it as kind of cheesy or maybe like dramatic or theatrical, right? I mean, in a lot of cases, especially if you've been selling for more than about 5 days, the problems and the needs that you're going to hear are going to be very similar. You don't hear 1,000 types of problems and needs. You might hear 5 to 10 rephrased in different ways, right?
Right.
And so it's like, okay, well, you want me to ask questions when I already know damn good and well what the answer is? It's like, well, yeah, because you're not really asking the questions about you, and that's part of it. But really, you're asking questions to bring this customer along the journey with you, right? You already know that if they have a problem with, their current solution is eating up a bunch of their time, well, you already know that that's going to translate into dollars. You already know that probably if they're annoyed by it, other people, employees, coworkers, bosses, maybe even customers are annoyed by the same problem. And, so it's very tempting to just jump to that. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do, right? You have to kind of embrace this strange idea that you're going to just keep asking questions, even though you know exactly what the answers are very likely to be. We're going to stop it right there for now. Please dive into the next episode of the Sales Lab to hear the conclusion of this interview. By the way, if you like what you've heard so far, be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.